Hello and welcome to the Monday night edition of the State of Scottish Football here on A State of Mind. And as you can see, I am very happy today, so there are no need to ask me any silly questions in the comments. Or Glenn, who is joining me tonight. Glenn, how are you doing?
Yeah, good. It's good to be back. I've been off for a few weeks, so good to join you again, Struan, on A State of Scottish Football.
Definitely. And there are quite a lot of talking points actually this weekend, despite the fact there were only 3 Premiership games. But I thought we'd start off by spending the majority of the show talking about the two semi-finals that we saw this weekend. First up, Celtic ended St Johnstone's incredible domestic cup run. And that sentence there, St Johnstone's incredible domestic cup run, does that just sum up how impressive they were last season?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's been another crazy weekend in Scottish football. And St Johnstone went cup crazy last season and deservedly won the double in the end. And Celtic did a very professional job to end it at the weekend at Hampden, getting that 1-0 victory. But yeah, St Johnstone deserve a lot of credit for what they did last season, but unfortunately just fell short again this season. And look, Celtic are much improved, and St Johnstone did all they could and managed to catch the second half after coming back up the road from Tannadice on Saturday. And yeah, as much as St Johnstone huffed and puffed, Celtic held firm.
Definitely. And of course, that is a final in a domestic cup in Ange Postecoglou's first season in charge. We'll get into the actual game in a second and a few more of the details, but just in a general sense, how impressive and important is that for Postecoglou? Obviously, when he came in at the start of the season, he was relatively unknown. The whole Eddie Howe situation, the way Celtic had crumbled away last season, a bit of an unknown summer as well. But to make it to the final of a cup, he's obviously doing something right.
Obviously doing something right. I suppose, Celtic fans will only determine it being something right if he ends up putting silverware in the trophy cabinet, because it's all well and good reaching finals, as both me and you know, but you don't get anything for winning them. But look, he had a lot of pressure, September, October time, and he rode that storm, and he's seen his side through to the first domestic final of the season. You look at the cross city rivalry; they've failed to reach that. I know we're going to come on to it, but it's already a good notch there. The way Celtic have kind of been going the last few weeks in the league, maybe that Livingston game aside, there's certainly momentum building there, and I'll definitely be interested to see how that carries on. Well, I hope it doesn't carry on this weekend from my own point of view, but yeah, there's certainly something going good at Parkhead just now.
Definitely. And as you say, there's interest, and of course, with Stephen Gerrard's time at Rangers, one of the biggest criticisms upon him leaving was that he never actually won any of the domestic trophies. And you've got Ange Postecoglou now, within 5 or 6 months of the jobs, has that potential. So I think it's absolutely massive. But we'll get into the game now. And I should start by saying there was a very good tribute to Berthold in this game. Every single player had the number 10 on their shorts. It was really good. And I think they put on a pretty decent performance. What we've seen from Celtic this season is that they have no issues really scoring goals. It's keeping them out at the other end. And it was quite a cagey affair. They struggled to break down St Johnstone. And in the end, it was James Forrest who got the goal. How would you summarise the performance from Celtic?
Yeah, as I said, I only caught the second half, but I think in cup competitions, it's all about being professional. And we all know St Johnstone are a very well organised, well drilled side. Cam Davidson's got them organised from the back, and he almost asks the question of oppositions to go out and break teams down. And Celtic have been able to do that at will to a lot of teams this season. And James Forrest is a player that hasn't featured a lot this season, and to be able to call on a player of James Forrest's experience, pace off of the bench obviously proved to be vital in that. And as I said, from what I saw, once Celtic got the goal, it was a very disciplined performance. And St Johnstone were maybe trying to hit on the counter, but Celtic could just equal that or bat them away at any opportunity. So I think a really, really good job from Ange Postecoglou in the substitutions that he made and the changes that he made to go out and end that game in 90 minutes, because they've got a big game coming up on Thursday. So I'm sure extra time would have definitely been something he was hoping to avoid.
One of the things we've seen with Celtic is how impressive that trident up front is. Of course, Kyogo through the middle, Jota on the left, and Abada on the right. All of them have come in this summer under Postecoglou. And it has forced somebody of James Forrest's quality completely out of the team. And as you mentioned there, him coming off the bench, how important is that for Celtic? That we know they obviously have the defensive issues, but up front, a player of James Forrest's quality, who's 30 years old, by the way, that kind of takes me back a little bit, the fact that he's now 30. But the fact that he can come off the bench and make such a big difference.
Yeah, well, he can also play right wing back as well. So we speak about Celtic's defensive issues, but you never know, he might find himself drop back in there, and that's maybe how he'll find himself back into the Celtic team because as you rightly say, that their front three are so good this season. But as we touched on many times on this show about certain team strengths and depths maybe lacking, Celtic have shown they have that. But certainly the players, James Forrest in particular, hasn't quite been fit enough, hasn't quite been there. But Celtic are now coming into this busy period that is the festive period, December especially, loads of games coming up. They're almost getting these players back to fitness at the right time so they can maybe chop and change when necessary. We saw that, as I touched on there, that Livingston game. There's question marks about whether Kyogo needed rested. But if you rest him and you're bringing in a fit James Forrest, it's not really a bad replacement.
It's pretty good, isn't it? And it's quite like for like the quality they've got. And of course, somebody like Giacomakis as well, who was one of the big summer signings, has almost been forgotten about in that sense because of how good the rest of them have been up front. And we actually saw today that Jota has won the Player of the Month award for October. And I think there was a few reports at the weekend as well that were saying Celtic were going to tie down his contract. I think it's €7.5 million is how much it's going to cost. Just how much of an obvious answer should this be for Celtic to just make this permanent? Because even if they go on to sell him in the future, you'd think that the way he's playing, you could almost double the money.
Yeah, I mean, I know he didn't want to be drawn on any speculation when he was asked that very question today in his press conference. But, if you're a Celtic fan or you're a Celtic board member, it's a no-brainer. You've got to be, it's that old like Rio Ferdinand on BT Sport. Just give him what he wants, get him to sign whatever, because he was very much an unknown when he came to Scottish football, but he's lit it up for Celtic and he's put in some very good performances, match-winning performances, and he's popped up with goals and assists, proving to be an already indispensable player.
Definitely. And of course, he came in for the summer. But if we look to St Johnstone in their summer transfer business, obviously they lost Kerr, the captain. That was a massive loss at the back. But I think the biggest person who they lost was Ali McCann. Obviously, that link he can make from the defence to the midfield. And I think they've really struggled with that. And one of the big problems in this game was that David Wotherspoon just picked up a bad injury as well. Do you think that St Johnstone have almost lost too many players to still be able to compete at this level to get to these cup competitions, like to all the way to the final?
I don't know. It's maybe a bit harsh saying they can't compete all the way to the final, because there's certainly teams that you'd maybe expect to have got to the semi-final stage ahead of the likes of St Johnstone, if you're speaking in terms of budget. And certainly in a one-off game, anything can happen. But certainly St Johnstone have been unlucky with certainly the way they lost those players in the summer, and not really having much time to replace them. And I think when you lose players of that quality, of that importance to a team, it does take them a bit of time to get back on track or find that momentum that's maybe been missing. And I think that's maybe attributed to St Johnstone's recent struggles, and they were maybe looking to this as a way of kickstarting their season. But look, St Johnstone will just dust themselves down and go again at the weekend and look forward to the Scottish Cup, because we know how much of a cup specialist they seem to be.
They'll just move on to the next one from now.
Yeah.
There were a few calls at the weekend that some people were saying that Celtic got quite lucky in the end to find a breakthrough. Do you think that's potentially a good comment in the sense of St Johnstone to know that they only just missed out? Or do you think it's a little bit unfair to say that Celtic only won because of a bit of luck?
I don't know. If you're a St Johnstone fan, I don't know, you lose a semi-final, you don't really want to be known as being unlucky. But I think for Callum Davidson, he should be proud of the effort that the players put in. You look at some of the performances Celtic have put in this season, and the ease, as I said earlier, that they've swatted teams aside. You touched on how clinical they can be. So to be so resolute should give St Johnstone encouragement. Probably makes the defeat hurt a little bit more, because I think it did take a bit of a deflection, the goal, if I remember it rightly. So that does maybe hurt. But look, Celtic would have just kept coming and would have probably found another way to get the breakthrough. Once Celtic did score, they could probably rest that little bit easier. You kind of get that feeling with the Glasgow 2 that they always do. Once they get the breakthrough in these sort of games, they do kind of ease off.
Definitely. And of course, well, Celtic did secure the 1-0 victory, which will take them through to the final. And the other semi-final that happened, I think from neutrals watching on, I think this was the better game in terms of action happening. Of course, it did come in the end of a 3-1 victory to Hibs. And first of all, just coming into this game, obviously we knew that Steven Gerrard had left Rangers. He'd gone down to Aston Villa. They actually won as well in the opening game against Brighton there. But it was a bit of an unusual situation at Rangers. Obviously, Van Bronckhorst had been announced, but he wasn't taken over. I think he had his first press conference today, so it was a bit of a B team coach situation there. But we know Rangers still have the quality, but they were just blown away by Hibs, to be honest, at the start of the game. I mean, a Paul Hanlon yellow card inside 10 seconds, it looked like it was just going to be another one of those days for Hibs, but then Martin Boyle hat-trick within 38 minutes. It was a pretty incredible start to the match, wasn't it?
Yeah, and the point you make, actually, I don't know, obviously you said you're happy today after yesterday, but the managerial kind of situation, I thought maybe did swing it back in Hibs' favour. I don't know how you feel on that, the fact that the Gerrard and kind of what he brought to Rangers, I suppose we should now say. Lining up against Jack Ross, who's been under pressure. Hibs had all that COVID issues, prior to this game as well. There was a real sense that this was probably going to be quite an easy game for Rangers. And like you rightly said, it just didn't turn out that way. And Martin Boyle continuing where he's left off for most of the season, and fair play coming back from Australia after that international break. So almost a round the world trip for him and banging in a hat-trick. And, Hibs have this habit of when they turn it on, they really turn it on. And yeah, what better way to do it than in a semi-final, although I'm sure any Hibs tuning in and yourself as well be hoping that they can repeat the feat on the 19th of December as well.
They just need to do it one more time. As you say, certainly coming into it, it potentially was the best time to play Rangers. Obviously, they are still the best team in the country, top of the Premiership. But without a manager, you're thinking, it's maybe the time to get at them. But when you look back to the league match between Hibs and Rangers, Hibs made a very good start to that game as well. But then the Ryan Porteous red card just sort of ended hopes, and then Rangers came back to win 2-1. Do you think that was on these Hibs players' minds, that they've come so far in these games on a few occasions, but it's the silly mistakes such as the red card that tend to just lose any kind of momentum and so the way the game? Do you think that was very important coming into this one?
It was definitely on Ryan Porteous' mind if you want to look at his post-match comments. But I think so. You're right. It's probably that sense of injustice that they suffered at Ibrox, a point to prove. And, it's been probably discussed many times across the state of Scottish football with the pressure that Jack Ross is going to have found himself under. And it was probably a question, I'm thinking out loud here, he might have said to the players, look, there's a lot of outside noise here about questioning whether Hibs are good enough, the players are good enough, that they're playing for the managers. Go out and show them what you're properly capable of here. No one was probably expecting that result at 4:00. Well, a few optimistic Hibs fans maybe, but certainly just the manner in the way they blew Rangers apart. And I don't know if that's, Rangers were still a bit kind of shocked by events off the field, that what happened. But when you've got a new manager in, you're maybe expecting some of these players to, I've got a point to prove here. I want to keep my place in case the new manager's got ideas to not play, person A, B or whatever. But look, fair play to Hibs. Didn't get distracted by any other events, focused on themselves and did the job. And fair play as well for not Hibsing it when it went to 3-1 as well, because I'm sure there'll have definitely been a few nerves.
Well, when Hibs did get the third, I was starting to feel a bit confident. I thought even with this poor defence, 3 would be enough. And then within a minute, Arfield had brought it back to 3-1 just before half-time, and there generally were concerns. But the concerns have been coming all season for Hibs, and that's because the defence have been so poor. Martin Boyle has been fantastic at the other end of the pitch, but defensively, Hibs have been all over the place and just making comical errors. There's been so many issues. And when Paul Hanlon got booked within 10 seconds, I was certain the fact that at least he would get a sending off, or at least give away a penalty or something in that description. But Hibs stayed strong, and I think in the second half, all the goals came within the opening 40 minutes. But I think in the second half, Hibs were solid, and it looked like a good defensive performance. Do you think that was key to the victory, was to just take this thing out of the game and hold on to it? You've got that 2-0 lead coming into the second half. You can sit back, catch them on the counter-attack, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who have to come out at you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the point you make about Hibs not being great defensively this season is probably when it goes to 3-1, not really the ideal time to concede, okay, even though you're 3-1 up, but it just gave Rangers a bit of momentum going into the break. And I think, Jack Ross's message would have probably been, look, let's keep it tight first 10 of the second half. And then, as you say, they've got to come out and force a breakdown. And it almost, in a way, suited Hibs, because if they could bat away the crosses, which they have been struggling with this season, but it then gave them the opportunity. Martin Boyle on the counter-attack, that's bread and butter to him. So, in a way, it did very much play into Hibs' hands. But if you're a Rangers fan watching that, given how much momentum Gerrard brought you, he only won one trophy out of 9 competed for. So it's not to say that they would have gone on to win the final, but there's going to be, I think was it 6 or 7 games in a row now they've gone behind first. So big job Giovanni Bronckhorst got on his hands, starting with that game against Prague on Thursday. And as I said there, Celtic may be building something. Hibs have got 3 games in hand, mind you. Okay, that doesn't take them overly close to Rangers, but still can't be discounted in terms of applying pressure. It's Giovanni Bronckhorst is going to have cause for concern at the manner of, especially some of the goals they conceded.
I think the first thing Van Bronckhorst needs to say when he comes into the dressing room is football games are a lot easier if we don't concede first, because that is just not the message Rangers have had this season. Last year, the defence was one of the best in the league. They looked so solid, and this season it's just not been the same. I don't know if Ryan Jack coming back will potentially help with that, but I've picked out a centre-half in each team to discuss for very different reasons. The first one is Porteous, who obviously his post-match celebrations were kind of funny, obviously taking the mick out of Steven Gerrard's comment, even though his answer made absolutely no sense to the question being asked. He was just fully committed to the answer. But we mentioned the league game in which he got sent off, and I'm sure, he's a young centre-half, he's still learning his game, but one thing we know with Porteous is he can be solid for about 89 minutes, and then he'll have a lapse in concentration or something and a big mistake. And I think he even potentially kicked the ball away that led to Arfield's goal in the game. But obviously in the Rangers game in the league, he got sent off, and a lot of people did say, that was the reason they got defeated. So do you think this was a really big showing of his just mentality in this game to stay in it, stay composed, and just throughout the 90 minutes be solid? And at the end of it, obviously, he did get to do a bit of bragging.
Yeah, well, I think, like you said, he obviously took a lot of criticism for that red card from a lot of quarters, not just Rangers fans, but a lot of quarters of Scottish football, because, as you touched on there, kind of his indiscipline, his lack of concentration. But, you even need to look at some of the mentions to the Scottish national team when he got the call up the night before the Denmark game. That, whether or not he paid attention to it or not, that's going to affect someone at a young age. I'm definitely not a big fan of Ryan Porteous. I think he is inexperienced and is a bit of a bomb scare at times, but he's young, he's still learning his trade, and that is a big game. But for Hibs fans and for Ryan Porteous, you probably want to see that on a consistent level. It's all well and good doing that and having a bit of fun at full time, but when you play Ross County in midweek, if he goes and gives away a penalty and you lose, well, who's laughing now? So it's all well and good in the heat of the moment, but keep those levels of performances up and start showing the doubters or those that have criticism towards Ryan Porteous that he is a good player and he can do that consistently, not just once in a blue moon. I don't know if you think that's fair.
No, I think that's entirely fair. I think that's always been the problem with Porteous, is that his consistency just isn't there. And coming into so many of these games, if you think back to last season in the final league game before St. Johnstone, he gave the ball away to Glenn Middleton, which led to it. And there's several occasions throughout the season you can see goals that have been Porteous's fault, and you think, he needs to get these out of his system. But at the same time, I think he only just turned 22 recently, he is still quite young, and I think if he does want to get into the Scotland national team, which I think he has that chance to get into it, especially if we're going to be playing 3 centre-halves and a few injuries here or there, I think he needs to get that consistency and do what he did on Sunday a lot more often, especially if nothing else, so he can brag at the end of the game. But the other centre-half who I want to talk about is Conor Goldson. And even though I am a Hibs fan and Rangers were the ones who were beaten, I was really angry at Conor Goldson's post-match comments where he was saying that the game was over at half-time when they were 3-1 down. I know he's not the captain of Rangers, but he's one of the leaders in that team. And if you're coming out at the end of the game saying that it was over at half-time at 3-1, what kind of confidence and mentality is that within the squad, especially when you know for a fact that, yes, Steven Gerrard has left and there are going to be big changes, but surely you want to impress the new manager. You want to say, yes, pick me. I'm going to show you. I'll give 110% for Rangers. But to just say that the game was over at half time, and there's almost a sense of irony that it was him who said that, because in the 88th minute, he had the best chance of the second half in which he skied.
Yeah, and like I said, I've not kind of looked into any of the reaction from full time, and it's exactly the point I made earlier about players wanting to impress a new manager, but that's not the attitude you expect. And as any fans, you'd be furious as a Hibs fan if the result was the other way around, and you had Martin Boyle coming out and saying, "Look, the game was done at half time." You never want to hear that from any player. You as a fan might accept it's game over at 3-0, but you don't want to hear that from the players on the pitch. You want to know that they are fighting right until it is, the end of the game. And there's also been a lot of talk around Conor Goldson's future at Ibrox. He's not signed his new contract, and now with Gerrard heading down to Aston Villa, will he follow suit? But Van Bronckhorst is probably, fuming at that sort of attitude as well, and it'll be something that was, getting drilled. And there was that video that was posted on Kemar Roof's Instagram over the weekend, I think maybe Friday night, when he was having a Nerf gun battle with Jermaine Defoe in the physio room, and it got quoted on social media about kind of had when the supply teachers there, that sort of vibe to it. So just wonder if there's, Gerrard's only been out the door less than a week. Is there already a change in attitude and mentality that, people said those sort of videos probably wouldn't have been uploaded, wouldn't have found their way to social media if Gerrard was still there? It just shows how much maybe of a tight ship he had, and that sort of attitude. Because again, I said before the game, if Gerrard was in charge, would the match have taken the same turn? Maybe, who knows? But I don't think the players would have been allowed to have that mindset that Conor Goldson came out with at half time under Gerrard, personally.
Definitely. I think back to the Braga game in the Europa League under Gerrard, where Rangers were behind and they were able to come back. And it's just crazy to think. Can you imagine if in 1999 at the Champions League final, Alex Ferguson just said to his players, we're 1-0 down, just forget it, we've lost this game anyway. It just, and for somebody of Goldson's stature in the club as well, to be one of these leading figures who was it was a rock at the back last season. And then now to suddenly just be coming away with that was ridiculous. But I think as well, obviously, we're talking about wanting to impress the managers, or the new coming manager. Just not a single Rangers player really stood out to me. I know Arfield scored the goal, but just throughout the 90 minutes, it just didn't look much. And when Ryan Kent got subbed off in the 60th minute, which to me was a bit strange. I know Ryan Kent hasn't quite been at it this season, but he's Ryan Kent. If anybody's going to come up with a moment of magic or to change a game, surely he's one of your danger men in that sense. And he was walking off the pitch, and it just sort of seemed like these players as a whole, as you say, I didn't know whether they just down tools a little bit. Maybe they're unsure what's going to happen. I suppose somebody of Ryan Kent's quality is constantly linked with a move down south. Now Gerrard's gone down there. There's a January transfer window coming up. I don't know if he's maybe thinking in the back of his mind, my time at Rangers is basically done here. Maybe I am looking ahead to the next window. Do you think that's a concern from a Rangers point of view, that a few of these players just didn't look up to? And I suppose throughout the season, you could draw parallels about how poor they have been just on an individual basis.
Yeah, massively. And like I said, though, I wonder, from a Celtic point of view and a Rangers point of view at the weekend's games, if there was one eye on Thursday night's games, because for both teams, they are massive in terms of progression in Europe, whether or not that Kent substitution was Thursday night in mind. But again, this is a chance to win a trophy. Realistically, are either of these teams going to win the trophy in Europe come May? Let's be honest, no, in my opinion. But you don't want to have that acceptance of defeat come the hour mark. Goals change games really quickly. We've seen it across Scottish football, especially you look at League One the last couple of weeks, how often games are being decided in the 90th minute. But it's very strange, and I don't know if it is, how much influence did Van Bronckhorst have on any if at all the game at the weekend. I think it was a case that he didn't have any influence. So strange decision, as you rightly say there, to take a player of Ryan Kent's influence off after an hour. But yeah, it's just made the task, maybe put a little bit of extra pressure on Van Bronckhorst going into his first game on Thursday night.
I think if Van Bronckhorst had anything to do with the Sunday game, I would already be quite concerned from a Rangers point of view. But obviously, Jack Ross coming into this game has been under a lot of pressure himself. Obviously, prior to the COVID outbreak at Hibs, haven't played a game since, I believe, October 27th, which was against Celtic Easter Road. 4 straight defeats coming into that. There were a lot of calls for Jack Ross to be sacked because of the way Hibs have just not been able to perform. But not only have they made it to the final of yet another cup, that's 2 in a row if you include the Scottish Cup from last season, but they beat Rangers to do it. And one of the big problems under Jack Ross has been Hibs have struggled to beat the biggest opposition in the big games. Do you think this game has not only taken a little bit of pressure off Jack Ross's shoulder, but perhaps a bit more within the players as well, and just the fans thinking, okay, yeah, maybe he is the right man?
Undoubtedly, it's taken pressure off Jack Ross, because I did say to a few of my friends that support Hibs, is, you lose that game, he's probably out the door. And he was probably, I'd said here on State of Scottish Football that he was probably being given up till the semi-final, because it was such an important game for Hibs that you don't want to take that risk and change a manager before a semi-final, because you could lose it. Sorry, Rangers, but it is ultimately the case. You're stick with what you know and hope that he can get the best out of the players on the day, which he ultimately did, and answered the critics that, I was very critical of him on my own podcast. I've been critical of one here as well. That 4 runs without a win, and he was not under anywhere near the amount of pressure as some certain other managers have found themselves in the press in Scottish football this season. And I think for Jack Ross, after that COVID outbreak, to go and get that win is just so huge, because Hibs had found themselves in such a good position, and they've slipped down to 7th in the league now. And now they've got something to play for between now and the 19th of December. Yes, you've now got 9 games, I think it is, in December as a result. But all these games are going to give the players something to play for, knowing that there is a starting place in a cup final up for grabs, which is huge. Otherwise, it's just a whole run of games and you've just got the league to worry about before the winter break. So this could be pivotal for Hibs, over the next couple of months going into the winter break. So massive for Jack Ross, but as we say, countless times on here, it's all well and good winning that game. How do they go and back it up? It's a trip to Dingwall next. Is it Wednesday night? Is that going back that up with a comfortable or comprehensive performance there on Wednesday and really kick on?
Definitely. And just one final point I want to touch on this match before we discuss the final of it was Martin Boyle. Obviously a hat-trick. He's been absolutely fantastic, far and above Hibs' best player this season. As you mentioned as well, though, he was away with Australia. He's been around the world. He's come back. Just how good a season is he having as well, to the point where he is literally deciding these big games? A hat-trick in a semi-final is huge for any player, but to do it within 38 minutes as well, it was unbelievable. He looked like he was having a great time. And in his post-match reaction, he said that it was up there with one of the best moments in his Hibs career so far.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. But certainly from the Hibs board perspective, they'll be having pound signs in their eyes of that sort of performance. And as good as Boyle's been for Hibs and probably carrying them certainly in the good times this season, it's surely as you might have in the back of your mind that these sort of performances are only going to continue to attract suitors from down south. He's been performing for Australia on the international scene as well, as domestically for Hibs. So there will be clubs circling, I'm sure, in January, and there might be a wee test of the water come January. You'll just be glad that the cup final comes before the transfer window.
December,
opens.
Lovely.
Yeah,
you can go out with a 4-goal victory. That would be perfect.
Yeah,
definitely. And of course, he did sign that new contract, but even then, I never feel contracts are a sense of he's definitely staying. It's seldom does a player actually see out whatever the contract is signed up until. So
it's almost like a bit of like an insurance to the club to make sure they get a good bit of value, because a buying club has to buy him out his contract.
Definitely. I think Aston Villa's Jack Grealish had signed a new 6-year contract last summer, and then this year he was sold to Man City for 100 million. With about 5 or 6 years left on the deal, so it's always one of them.
So what price are you putting on Boyle's head then? You're not saying 100 million.
Well, he's 28, so he's in about the peak years of his career. He's been fantastic. What did Kieran Tierney go for? About 25 million. What was Edward 15? No.
Yeah,
it was 5 or 6. I honestly could not tell you at the moment, to be honest. We'll see when the January transfer window comes up to see how better he's been doing. But as you say, the final will be happening before that, the 19th of December, Celtic versus Hibs. What are your thoughts coming into this one? Because obviously we would still favour Celtic to be they are the favourite for this game, obviously. But do you think Hibs can get at them? I mentioned previously that both teams actually are pretty weak defensively. It could certainly be another high score. I think the last game at Hampden between the two sides was the 5-2. I think the Paul Heckingbottom era kind of came to an end that day, the 5-2. I can't think the two sides have met at Hampden since then. So will it be I think it'll be another high score coming up?
Yeah, I think when these two teams meet, it's normally an exciting affair. Well, more so at Easter Road, but I think these teams will go gung ho, and it's going to be interesting because you the point you made there about Jack Ross not getting the results necessarily against Celtic and Rangers. Can he go and do that? He's done that in the semi-final. Can he go and do that in the final? But for Ange Postecoglou, as you also said, how important it is for him going and reaching that final. But it's important that he wins that, because if he doesn't, there's immediately pressure back on him because he's failed to win that first final. So it's really set up tentatively from both managers' point of views. I really hope from a Scottish football perspective, Hibs take more fans than they did in the semi-final against Rangers. I'm not sure how many tickets were sold.
It's 17,500 Hibs allocation.
Is it? Well, hopefully they can sell that out for the final, and it's a good spectacle off the field as well. I think it always looks better when it's kind of more 50-50 allocation than what we saw on Saturday's game. But certainly on the field, both sides like to play attacking football, and both sides like not to defend, as we've seen this season. So it could be anything. But I think for Hibs, if they can get the first goal in that final, and let's see if Ryan Porteous can put in a performance that he did on Saturday. No pressure.
Definitely. That's how I feel this game is going to be. I feel whoever wins it has to score at least 2 or 3, because you know that you're going to concede at least 1. But I like what you were mentioning about the managers there. And I feel there is almost that storyline to this game. Obviously, Postecoglou, within the first 6 months, he could win a trophy and become a bit of a hero. Fair enough, it's not the biggest of trophies, but at the same time, to come in at a pretty bad period for Celtic, given what happened last year, to come in, win a trophy, I think would be massive. But likewise, obviously, Jack Ross could deliver the first piece of silverware since 2016, the first League Cup, and even longer than that. So I think there's definitely a lot riding onto this one, and it's just quite interesting to see what happens, because, as you say, whichever manager comes out on top, it's absolutely massive for them. But then whoever loses, the pressure is going to be immense given what's already happened. So it's definitely one to keep an eye on. But we'll jump into the Premiership action, because there were 3 games that happened, and there were certainly a lot of incidents. I want to start with your Aberdeen with. I think even though there were 2 semi-finals, this has probably been one of the biggest talking points that happened at the weekend. With Funso Ojo going over to the crowd, getting pushed by a fan, and being sent off by Bobby Madden. What are your just initial thoughts on the incident?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm still totally perplexed and totally angry at the whole situation, whether it's a red card or not. I mean, the fact that Bobby Madden's first thought was to issue a yellow card that resulted in a red card instead of protecting the player. There was no consultation. I felt he couldn't get his cards out quick enough. And whether that was a factor because of Callum Butcher's red card 2 minutes earlier, I'm not sure. But as I said to you before we came live, I was in the fair play upper, and I wasn't sure if Ojo had reacted. Now, if Bobby Madden isn't sure if Ojo reacted, take that time to consult with a steward, a policeman, a fourth official who's probably got a good view of what's going on. Now, that I've seen this rhetoric on United fans saying that Ojo, slapped the ball boy. That's a load of nonsense. He jumped the barrier, and his hands were out to try and stop his momentum. He hadn't even got to the United fans, and this idiot, let's be honest, had already made his way to the bottom of the stairs and was ready to shove Ojo back. And I think James McFadden was right on Sports Scene. Ojo deserves a lot of credit for showing as much restraint as he did. And, as I said to you before I went live, you look back to the incident that happened, I think it was 2016, when a Hibs fan came onto the pitch and confronted James Tavernier. James Tavernier wasn't booked that night, and James Tavernier physically assaulted the Rangers fan. Whether or not we want to call it assault or not, he put 2 hands on the fan. No booking. So I think it's the fact there's been no consistency to that, but it's just a terrible incident for Scottish football as a whole. It's just not a good look.
Definitely. I was actually at that game because it happened just in front of the East Stand where we were seeing it from, the Tavernier incident, and it was just unusual to see what was happening. But as you say, obviously Tavernier did get confronted and he confronted back. But I think Ojo was very professional in just not reacting, because if somebody's come from the crowd and pushed you, your immediate reaction is, well, I'm going to push them back. They've just assaulted me on the pitch effectively. But he didn't. He stood tall and he still got the yellow card for it. When I first saw it, I was almost trying to give the referee the benefit of the doubt. I don't know why. I was just trying to get my head around how on earth he sent him off. And I was thinking that if a player runs towards the crowd when they celebrate, they now get booked. But he didn't even go to the crowd. He stopped by the barrier and he got sent off for it. And I just think it almost gives a bad message, doesn't it, to a fan's point of view? If you push a footballer, the chances are they're the ones who are going to get sent off. And as we mentioned there, the Tavernier incident, it doesn't happen often in football, but we do see players actually getting assaulted. I mean, if you look in France last night, Dimitri Payet had a bottle of water thrown at him. It does happen a few times. And if it's the players who are going to get punished for this, it's a little bit worrying.
Yeah, and it is worrying because, you look at some of the grounds in Scottish football, I'm thinking, Tynecastle, we've seen what Tynecastle's like with, the animosity that can be shown from home fans. And players often have to get quite close at Tynecastle to maybe retrieve the ball and stuff like that. Easter Road's the same, the East Stand. Tawdry, maybe to a lesser extent, is not going to get that sort of reaction unless you're maybe playing certainly, the bigger sides. But it's a hugely dangerous precedent that's been set by Bobby Madden here, because, as you said, it's almost like if a fan now reacts, they know that player's going to get booked. And you see the jokes coming up online about, oh, well, that's one way of getting a player sent off in a crucial match, but it's not what it should be about. Ultimately, the players have got to be protected at the end of the day, because that incident could have been a lot worse than it ended up being. And at the end of the day, the fan that was involved has still managed to endure, stay, and watch the rest of the game. He wasn't even thrown out. But Dundee United, just at 6 o'clock there as we came live, have since issued a statement to say that his season ticket has since been cancelled due to behaviour that breaks the code of conduct of their season ticket. But they will be making no further comment due to the police investigation. And I find it quite appalling, actually, that Dundee United, it's taken them till 6 o'clock on Monday night to make a statement on this incident. Tam Courts and Dundee United were very quick to come out on the back of, support for Giandro Fuchs in the incident that happened in the Ross County game. And, without all the facts being known, it's quite simple what happened in this game, and there was very little support. And, even from an Aberdeen point of view, I was very disappointed at the way Stephen Glass handled the incident, saying that he felt Funso Ojo let the team down. I felt really sorry for him, because I didn't feel he had any sort of protection from his manager and the referee at the time. And obviously, since then, Aberdeen have had to release a statement, the director of football, saying that Stephen Glass has gone back on his word and now does support Ojo, but it's not really a good look.
Definitely. And as you say, they're feeling sorry for Ojo. He literally did nothing. He was the one who got pushed, and he is the one who's now getting criticism from his manager. He's been sent off. It just seems everything was going against him. But
it can't even appeal either.
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous, to be honest, the fact that that's happened. And it does shine a bad light, obviously, on football in general, but on Scottish football, people seeing that from the outside and thinking, how has he been sent off for doing that? How bad is the standard of refereeing? And it's just ridiculous, to be perfectly honest. In the actual game as well, was it 2 minutes before Callum Butcher had been sent off? And you're thinking, that's a massive advantage that Aberdeen can have. And then a refereeing decision is this. It was absolutely ridiculous, but has that potentially changed the outcome of the game as well? The fact that Aberdeen could have gone with 11 players for a much longer period.
Oh, massively changed. I mean, to be honest, the game itself was really this incident has overshadowed was a big win for Dundee United ultimately in the end. But to be honest, the game was a terrible affair, and it was really a story of 2 red cards up until the Ian Hart's goal. But even the Dundee United red card is such a stupid incident. I don't know what Callum Butcher is thinking. A player you're almost guaranteed to get booking, but what he's doing, thinking, that you'd get away with punching Ramirez where he did. I actually thought at the time it was something that Ryan Edwards had done until I saw it was Callum Butcher walking off. But, my mates had said, oh, he's punched him. And I saw it back today and I thought, what was going through his mind in that moment to, hit him where it hurts? And right as Bobby Madden's walking over to diffuse the situation, fair enough, Bobby Madden's got that decision right, but like I said, it just swung the game totally. There was, Stephen Glass lost his composure towards halftime and found himself sent off as well. It just obviously did rattle a lot. The Aberdeen support maybe did annoy the Aberdeen players as well, but I felt the game was petering out into nothing. But once again, our defensive issues reared their head. But certainly from an Aberdeen point of view, we never even got a chance to assert any authority. 11 versus 10, and it just ruined the game totally. And just leaves a really disappointing taste in the mouth.
Definitely. And you mentioned there as well, Glass got himself sent off later on in the game, and it almost did seem a little bit rich of him talking about Ojo's red card. Is that the fourth time that Stephen Glass has been sent off in the sideline? Or is it 3 or something?
It's too many. That's what I mean.
Yes.
But it's you're absolutely right, because it was a point that I am fully prepared to make on the podcast that I'm recording tomorrow, and I feel he's let Aberdeen down more, because he's got himself sent off. So the person that's supposed to be there leading the team and supporting from the sidelines has gone and got himself sent off, whether or not he's standing up for Ojo or not. Just show a bit of restraint. We speak about halftime team talks and players showing the right mentality. Get into the dressing room and get them fired up to use that against them. Not get yourself sent off. I don't know. I don't know whether it's that inexperience in Stephen Glass or not, but again, it's another one. He'll probably find himself with a touchline ban coming up, I'm sure. But it's a shame. As I said, Dundee United have gone and got themselves the victory, but we're speaking about all these other incidences instead, and so it's just the way it's turned out, unfortunately.
It's quite ridiculous, isn't it? The fact that Hark's goal is about the fourth talking point of this game once you get through the 3 red cards and so on and so forth. So we'll come to that now. Ian Hark's obviously got the goal, a massive win for Dundee United, as you say. How big, though, do you think it is in the grand scheme of things to get this win? Obviously, this was the fixture on the opening day of the season, which I believe Aberdeen secured a 1-0 victory. It was the flip result this time. Do you think that'll give Tam Courts' side a bit more positivity going forward, even though it has been massively overshadowed by some other incidents?
Yeah, it's massively overshadowed by the other incidents, but look, they're 2 points behind Celtic. They're sitting 4th in the table, and it was a big victory. And as I said, I really felt the game was going nowhere. There was no quality in the final third. Aberdeen offered nothing, if at all, in that second half, and Dundee United very little themselves. It was just a poor moment from Matty Longstaff, gave the possession away cheaply, and we conceded the corner, and once again defended like statues, like we did against Motherwell the couple of weeks before. And the goal's pretty comical, actually. If you're watching it for the first time, you see how open the goal is for Ian Harkes to knock home. But look, Dundee United pick up a valuable 3 points, and it's Dundee United's motto is winning 1-0 this season, it seems to be. And look, they find themselves, as I say, level on points with Hearts, sitting there in 4th place, and they've done it again at home. It's another impressive victory. Aberdeen, Dundee, Hearts, although they lost to Hearts, Rangers, all beating them at home. Got a point at Parkhead. Fair play to Tam Courts, because as you said, the opening day of the season, I thought, Aberdeen have got the rookie appointment of the season, but who's laughing now?
It has totally flipped, hasn't it? Obviously, the way things have gone for United and Tam Courts' team, they just seem to be grinding out these 1-0 results here or there. I remember when they beat Hibs 3-0, talk about Hibs defeat again, beat Hibs 3-0, it was just seldom because they'd scored more than 3 goals, but they've been so solid defensively throughout the season, and it was yet another victory there. Do you think that's a good spine and a good sort of backbone to have if they do want to make that push for European places?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was something that Tam Courts, kind of touched on at full time about the team spirit and the togetherness that they showed. And I suppose probably he would have probably felt a sense of frustration had they not gone on to win the game, and maybe viewed it as a couple of points dropped. But honestly, if you said that game finished 0-0, I'd have said it was a deserved and probably a fair result. And I think the fact that Aberdeen went on to lose that game has left more of a bitter taste in the mouth. But from a Dundee United point of view, they'd gone into this game on back of a really heavy defeat at Tynecastle, and it's not been like them to concede many this season. So probably for them, real confidence to bounce back from that and keep their sights, as you say, on European spots.
Definitely. Now, you touched on a player there from Aberdeen who, in the summer, I thought he was one of the best signings on loan, and it's Matty Longstaff, because at Newcastle he was so highly rated. You know, I remember he scored a winner against Man United in a 1-0 victory under Steve Bruce. Obviously, he's got the older brother Sean as well, but it seemed like Matty had all the praise, all the build. It looked like he was going to be one of these ones for the future, making his way up to the English Premier League. And I thought Aberdeen getting him on loan has been absolutely fantastic. But obviously, the red card was the biggest talking point. From my social media page, the Aberdeen fans, I've just seen so many people saying, send him back, just send him back down south. What kind of a signing was Matty Longstaff? And obviously say he was poor this game, but do you think just overall he just hasn't quite been able to adapt to Scottish football in the way that many people thought he would?
Yeah, I was definitely one of those that was quite happy to send him back to Newcastle as soon as possible. He's just, it's funny, on, Red Tinted Glasses, the podcast that I do, and I got criticised after 3 games of Matty Longstaff for saying that he's a player that's not got up to the pace of Scottish football. Well, I've not seen anything in the games since then to convince me otherwise, and Saturday was another example of that. And I think too many times, was it James Collins that used the striker that played for Hibs?
Yeah.
He was another example, did well in England, came up and just couldn't get used to Scottish football. I think there's a lot of players that struggle when they come up. They think it's going to be easy. Shane Duffy, Joey Barton, all these players think, Scottish Premiership, this will be a canter, no problem. And it's the pace and physicality just catches them out totally. And that's what caught Matty Longstaff out at the weekend. What, too much time on the ball, bundled off of it, Dundee United countered, got the corner, and that's where Aberdeen conceded from. It's just no urgency in his pace of play. And for me, I 100% agree. I was, so excited. We're getting a Premier League player on loan. He's going to play alongside Scott Brown. What a midfield we've got lined up here. We're going to bounce back. It's just not worked out that way, unfortunately. And it showed. I think the only reason he managed to come on, that folk maybe thought he would start after Lewis Ferguson's suspension, but he can't even force his way into the starting 11 when he's suspended. So whether or not Stephen Glass has maybe got a decision on his hands come January, depending again what happens around Lewis Ferguson, is do we send him back and look at what we've got in our own club in the youth ranks and promote from within? Because I'd rather see one of our own youngsters coming through than wasting a wage on Matty Longstaff right now.
Definitely. It's one of those signings that I could easily see being the loan cancelled in January. I could easily see him being sent back up. And I suppose you see that sometimes with players of his age. Although I don't think he's actually that young. I think he's about 22 or something, or 21, 22. So, you think he'd be a bit better. But I think you make a really good point that a lot of players probably do come from down south thinking that they'll be able to take to the Premier League like a duck to water. But the reality is it's a lot harder than people make out. And I think Matty Longstaff could be another one of those examples, like the Joey Bartons, like Shane Duffy, who we've mentioned in recent years anyway, who've just not quite been able to. Graham Doran's coming back to Scottish football, another one who struggled since coming back. But obviously there, Dundee United have gotten the win, and have Aberdeen got Celtic coming up, I believe, this weekend. Yeah. So that I couldn't remember if it was the next week, but how are you feeling going into that one? Oh, no problem.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be joined on Red Tinted Glasses by fellow State of Scottish Football contributor Colin Watt tomorrow to look ahead to that game. But, we put in a good performance. Our last good performance was probably against Hearts, Rangers and Hibs. And, we did well against Celtic at Pittodrie, but ultimately didn't get the right result. So maybe is it going to be another case of we raise our games against the so-called better sides in the league? No disrespect to everybody else, but the games that maybe in previous seasons Aberdeen were expected to win, we're not doing so this season. So I don't know. I've not got much hope at all. We're a very depleted squad. David Bates was out with COVID at the weekend. Funes Ojo's now suspended. Jack McKenzie picked up a bad injury. So defensively, we're a bit all over the place. And if we can come away with a draw from Parkhead, I'll bite your hand off right now.
A lovely Matty Longstaff last-minute winner or something. Like I said, he scored against Man United in the Premier League.
If Matty Longstaff scores a last-minute winner, I'll eat my hat live on this show next Monday.
Can make sure we've got that recorded for that. That would honestly be fantastic. Some sort of 89th minute winner. I'd love that. Well, we'll go to the other game now, which was a bit of a surprising result, which was seeing Motherwell pick up a 2-0 victory over Hearts. Motherwell have made a really good start to the season, but they kind of fallen away a wee bit in recent weeks, came back with a massive victory here. But the biggest talking point I've seen come out from this game is that there were people online calling for Robbie Neilson to leave Hearts. And I found it quite ridiculous. I think just in football now, that if your team loses a game that they're expected to lose, it's just straight to get the manager out and stuff like that. Because I thought Robbie Neilson has been absolutely fantastic. I think this is only the second defeat they've had, well, certainly in the league anyway, the other one being to Aberdeen, I think. Yep. Just double checking there, yeah. So what do you make of the calls for Robbie Neilson to leave after this defeat?
Oh, it's honestly laughable. Hearts fans are so funny. They can't handle losing at all. It's really cute actually. But yeah, watching their side go unbeaten and then losing to Aberdeen and then Motherwell, but it'll be probably the disappointment in the way that they've lost both those games, and probably, from, like I just said, the manner in which Dundee United lost that game at Tynecastle. Hearts fans will have been looking, we've blown Dundee United away. What the hell's going on now? It's just one of those things. But you can't. You're sitting 2 points behind Celtic after 14 games, 6 points off the top of the table from a newly promoted side. It's just ridiculous calling for the manager's head already at this stage of the season.
Definitely. And you look at the games that they've had so far this season, beating Celtic on the opening day, drawing the Edinburgh Derby against Hibs, a draw against Rangers as well. There've been some absolutely fantastic results. And the 5-2 against Dundee United is incredible, given how defensively stable that United have been this season. So it is quite ridiculous. But I think as well in this game, Taylor Moore got sent off. You're 10 men, and to still think the manager is, the biggest problem after a result like that, I think is just very unfair on Robbie Neilson for what he's done, to be honest. I think it's definitely a difficult one. But from a Motherwell point of view, obviously it's fantastic, given a 2-0 victory. Do you think that's them getting back on track now? Obviously they did make a good start, but they had withered and fallen away a wee bit in recent weeks.
Yeah, I mean, what a way to respond after getting, to be honest, dismantled by Rangers, and that's just 6-1. As you say, go away to Aberdeen and comfortably beat us 2-0 after really weathering a storm for the first 45 minutes at Pittodrie, and then turning over Hearts 2-0. So it's 4 goals scored and none conceded, and after you get absolutely battered by Rangers. So for Graham Alexander, he must take immense pride at rebuilding the confidence of that team, because it must have taken some amount to do so after that defeat. But they can start probably looking up. We touched on Dundee United and their potential European ambitions. Motherwell will be thinking the exact same. Sitting comfortably in the top 6 right now. Again, as I say, obviously, Hibs do have some games in hands, but even then, sitting 5 points clear of St Mirren, so they'll want to cement that top 6 space and then look up towards Europe, because it's third guarantees group stage football this season. So your likes of Hearts, Dundee United, Hibs, Motherwell, I would want to say Aberdeen, but I think that's a pipe dream just now, will be probably eyeing up third place just now.
Definitely, it could be Aberdeen. You never quite know about that. One thing I thought that was interesting as well, though, was the fact that neither Tony Watt nor Kevin Van Veen had anything to do with the 2 goals in terms of the goal and the assist to them. Do you think that's quite a positive in that sense? Just because obviously this season those 2 have been the main danger men. They've been absolutely fantastic, but just to have more people in the team get a little bit involved. Obviously, Sean Goss got both assists. He was originally of Man United, went to Rangers, and it just didn't quite work out. But it seems he's maybe finding his feet a little bit better now.
Yeah, I think that's 3 assists now, because I think he got one of the assists at Pittodrie as well. I noticed Connor Shields scored the first goal. He was that hot prospect from Queen of the South that many teams were touting last season. Motherwell took the gamble, and is that him now paying off? And then I thought it was quite ironic that Ricky Lamy got the goal, given all the plaudits that Craig Halkett's been receiving, and it's his former Livingston teammate that goes up and gets the second goal in this game as well. But Motherwell are a physical side, so I was surprised that they haven't kind of scored. Their defenders haven't scored more goals this season. But I think you're right. The fact that if they can get goals from other areas that aren't Tony Watt and Kevin Van Veen, it's going to be vitally important. And I think as well, they'll be bitterly disappointed in that manner of losing to Rangers at home, because they are normally good at Fir Park. So to go and put in a display against Hearts, try and get that bit of Fortress Fir Park back. They can certainly build on that going forward into December.
Definitely. And going back to Hearts here, obviously they're at home this coming weekend. It's not going to be too big of a result, I don't think, in the grand scheme of things, this one, to put them off. Well, I'd imagine they'll get straight back into winning ways.
Yeah, and then they'll want Robbie Nielsen to get manager of the month if they go and win this weekend. So
potentially, you never know. I'm actually a big fan of Robbie Nielsen, to be honest. I have to say, I think he's done a really good job. I think it's a bit unfair. Obviously, it's not a large proportion of fans at the weekend who were asking for him to go out. It was definitely a minority on social media, but I think he's a good manager, and that's a Hibs fan saying that. So, anyway, but we'll use the last 5 minutes to talk about the last game of the Premiership of the weekend. And to be honest, on paper, looking at it, it just wasn't quite the biggest of games, St Mirren versus Livingston, but Livingston once again coming up with a late goal, and that seems to be quite a theme of them this season, holding on to these results and then grabbing one late. Do you think that's a good thing, to the fact that obviously they are in the relegation zone, but they are proving that they can come up with goals? And it was Nicky Devlin, obviously the fullback, who provided this one.
Yeah, 2 stunning goals in this game as well, by the way. And I think it's fair play to Livingston getting all these late goals, but I think it's 4 unbeaten now on grass. As well for them. So, for all these people that said Livingston couldn't play on grass, that they're, fair showing people this season, and there's certainly a team spirit about them this year. They're not giving up. As you say, they're the late goals they're coming up with, so they are fighting to the very end. The Ross County game in particular sticks out for me, but a huge result for Livingston to kind of give themselves a bit of a breathing space to Dundee. It's a 3-point gap they've got. So Mirren will be desperately disappointed to concede that goal late on. We talk about Motherwell there wanting to cement their place in the top 6. That would have been seeing, St Mirren have 3 points on Hibs, but 3 points on Aberdeen as well, playing the same, amount of games as well. And St Mirren do come up to Pittodrie in a few weeks' time as well. So St Mirren will be desperately disappointed because they've definitely got ambitions to be a top 6 club. But yeah, as you said, from Livingston, for their point of view, that's a huge point in their bid to avoid the relegation zone or playoff spot.
Definitely. That top 6 push just always seems to go without St Mirren. It always seems to get away from them. And it looked like a lot of people saying this season could be it. But again, they've been struggling. Jim Goodwin's side, who I learned is only 39, which kind of surprised me.
Yeah.
A lot of Scottish Premiership managers are very young at the moment, but that's another debate. Obviously, the goal from St Mirren, I think you could almost predict that it was Jamie McGrath again. Just how is there a side in the Premiership who rely on one player? Martin Boyle for Hibs possibly this season, but is there a side who sort of rely on one player quite in the same way at the moment that St Mirren rely on Jamie McGrath?
No, since you already said Boyle for Hibs, but I think this is why St Mirren will be disappointed, conceding that late goal, because I think, as Hibs have got a task on keeping Martin Boyle in January. St Mirren have got a huge task on keeping Jamie McGrath, especially if you think how close it was in the summer transfer window for him actually leaving, ironically, to Hibs.
Yeah.
So they'll be probably wanting to get as many points on the board as possible. It's not to say one player is irreplaceable, but for certainly how pivotal he's been to St Mirren this season. I worry for them if he does go in January. Could it see a slide down the table? So they're certainly putting the foundations in place early on. But yeah, again, like Boyle at the weekend, he's adding pound signs to his transfer value.
Definitely. It is one of those signings where if he was to leave, signing is the wrong term there, sorry, but yeah, if he was to leave and sign for another club, you do fear for how St Mirren would cope, because they just haven't been able to find the back of the net enough this season. And you think this game is another example where they're holding on for a 1-0 for so long, and in the end, Livingston get back to it. If you just scored a second one, you potentially can put the game to bed.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's been St Mirren's problem for a long time. Goodwin knows it, that they don't score enough goals, and to be honest, I have been surprised. I thought Eamon Brophy coming in would have been a good signing for them, and he would have kind of hit the ground running, but it's not really lit up for them. So probably frustrating for Jim Goodwin, and yeah, like I said, a big few games coming up for them. As I said, in and around points wise with Aberdeen and Hibs, and they come up to Pittodrie in 2 weeks. So that's Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday games coming up next week. It's going to be really interesting to see how the table looks after that.
Definitely. Well, I've just seen someone in the comments there saying Austin McPhee was working under Steven Gerrard at the weekend for Aston Villa, which is
I did think I saw that on Match of the Day, actually.
That is not something I ever thought would happen even 2 weeks ago, but there we go. Anyway, I think that's going to bring us to an end here for tonight. I'd like to thank Glenn for joining me, and everyone else, of course, for interacting in the comments. We'll be back again tomorrow at the same time as usual, 6 p.m. I think we'll be talking more about the cup games on those shows, so be sure to stick around for that. But anyway, it's goodbye from me, and thanks again.